Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Narelle Doan, and I'm the Director of Marketing for Viking Pure Solutions. And we are very pleased to host today's panel discussion with a great group of panelists. As you can see here lined up, we're going to be talking about strategies for success in dementia caregiving and really comparing the balance of person versus process. Dementia caregiving is something that really should be based on the individual's needs and centered around approaches that lead to best quality of care for them as a person. And we're going to be getting into that subject today. So before we get started and before I introduce our panelists, I did want to highlight, please feel free to put questions in either the chat and engage in the chat, or feel free to put questions in the Q&A section. That's off to the right-hand side of your screen, the little question mark with a circle around it, or the chat message box. And without further ado, let's jump right in. Nicole, do you want to introduce yourself? Nicole's going to be our moderator today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here. Founder of We'll Gather and co-founder of Think Tank with James, my business partner, who's here today. And I'm honored to create platforms to amplify initiatives, resources in the care economy. And I do that through the We'll Gather podcast, navigating the world with your aging loved one, and share those valuable insights and stories from experts and educators. We also work with organizations to highlight their initiatives and great work. And I am looking forward to the panel today with all of these people that I really admire and respect.
Carrie, you want to go next?
Absolutely. I'm Carrie Alberts, aka Dementia Darling, and I am a very passionate advocate and educator in the dementia community. I haven't updated my bio for this specific panel. I am full-time now as myself, Dementia Darling, and I am here to fight the tragedy narrative and to prove that there is joy and love to be had. And I am just so honored to be here with some of my favorite people in this community. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Glad to have you. Adria, please join us.
Hi, I'm Adria Thompson. I'm a speech language pathologist and dementia care educator. I've been an SLP for 10 years, working in long-term care and skilled nursing, memory care, assisted living, home health, and acute care. And I create videos every single day on social media to help people know how to care for individuals with dementia.
Wonderful. We're so glad to have you. And Andrea, as our caregiver joining the panel today, please introduce yourself as well.
Hi, my name is Andrea. I am on social media as Andrea Crystal. I am a full-time professional and a full-time caregiver to my mom, who has young onset Alzheimer's. So she's lived with me now for the past 3 to 4 years, prior to her official diagnosis. And then prior to that, it was long distance, a good 2 hours between us. So I'm just excited to be able to be here. I share a lot of content that just humanizes the caregiving experience, kind of tears down some of that stigma that says that your feelings are wrong, that you're a bad person because you struggle with this or you feel these hard feelings. So that's really what I focus on, just humanizing the entire experience for the person with dementia and the person taking care of them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're so glad to have you. James, will you introduce yourself as well?
Happy to. Hi, everyone. I'm James Lee. I do a couple of different things in senior living, but my story started as a caregiver, a professional caregiver on the front line 16 years ago. And today I'm proud to serve our organization, Bella Groves, and we'll get into a little bit of that in our conversation today. Nicole and I do the Think Tank event together, and really all of the things that I do are trying to demonstrate and show that in order for you to make big impact, you don't have to be part of big business or big groups, that small endeavors can have just as big of an impact. And I hope we'll get to dig into some of that today.
Awesome. Sometimes better, I think.
Absolutely.
Sometimes more of an impact. And last but not least, Dan.
Hey, everyone. Dan Lawson here, Viking Pure Solutions. Just super passionate about removing toxic chemicals from senior living communities. And on behalf of Narelle and I, we're just so honored to be able to host this panel today. Just some amazing minds and some great insight. And I'm excited for our listeners that can join us today. And then for those that are going to be able to catch this, kind of on record in the future, I think we're going to, leave this conversation extremely enlightened and motivated, as we've got some great people here that are really dedicated to changing, or to committing to change in the senior living environment, which we really need. So thanks, y'all.
Absolutely. Awesome. Nicole, please take it away.
Yeah, we have a lot to cover today. So know that it's going to be a dynamic conversation, a lot of different perspectives, which I'm really excited about. To start us off, James, what are the logistical realities of long-term care that can affect the quality of care and potentially alter our approaches as we're talking about this topic of caregiving strategies, person versus process?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question to kick us off for person versus process. I've been in the shoes of a personal family caregiver for somebody living with dementia. And as I mentioned in my introduction, I've been a caregiver on the front line, activity director, and other leadership roles at the senior living level. And now I have the distinct kind of perspective of being a business owner in that same regard. And, the shortcut for what I could say here is that I've learned that aligning incentives and understanding the motivations of each of the parties is really what's at the heart of all of this. I think family caregivers and certainly frontline workers in senior living, they're closest to the issue. They're closest to the problem they're trying to solve, which is, how do I take care of my loved one with dignity? In our profession, we may call it person-centered care, whole person. There's a lot of different ways to talk about that. But I think the push and pull of business versus care, oftentimes I found that owners and investors and people who fund a lot of senior living projects may not themselves see the value of person-centered care. And so I think part of what we're going to dig into today is, and a big part of what we're trying to do at Bella Groves is, how do we create a business plan around person-centered care? Instead of creating a business that happens to provide care and, let's make it person-centered, go the other way. Start from the basis of, how do you create person-centered care? Okay, then how do you staff that? How do you create a revenue model around it? And you work your way backwards.
Yeah, it's so true. And there's so much that we have to think about, right? All the different logistics of providing care that we come into play with people with understanding running organization, right? How that all plays out.
Yeah.
Carrie, what is person-centered care and dementia care terminology? Why is it so crucial for us to focus on these personalized approaches in our caregiving rather than strictly follow standardized processes?
Yeah, no, this is so important, and it's very prominent when you can tell when person-centered care is happening, right? So in dementia care, we can't do blanketed care. Like, just stop right there. Dementia care is so different for everyone. It doesn't matter if you have the same diagnosis, you could have a completely different journey, right? And then it's across different ages, it's across, there's so many factors in place. And if we're just like, dementia care is just this blanketed thing, we do it for everyone, it works, it just can't work. We have to know the people we are caring for. We have to know their unique preferences. We have to know history, right? Sometimes we revert back to things we've done in our past. If we don't know those things, how do we meet them where they are and give them the best quality of life? And this is what makes dementia care so intricate and so, difficult, right? We're trying to take care of so many people, and having to take the time to do that, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes a lot of, legwork, but that's how we give people the care they deserve. And that's how we give people the best quality of life, is truly meeting them where they are. So we can't ever go into, care settings with multiple people, or with one person even saying, okay, I learned this tip, it's got to work, it's going to work. Like, you can't go into things thinking that. So it makes it really difficult on the carers, right? You never really know what you're dealing with. There's always, a lot of go with the flow and, minute to minute type things. But when you're able to be armed and empowered with knowing the person you're going to get a lot further and you're going to have a lot more momentum caring for them. So I think it's just truly understanding dementia is so unique compared to other things people, might be the other diseases and the care that asks for and needs. This is truly wholly about the person. It's changing their entire life and being, right? So we got to understand everything about this person. And so, yeah, that's why it's so important to be personalized across the dementia journey as this is progressing and meeting them where they are. And I hope that made sense, because I just kind of went, wow, because I'm very passionate about person-centered care.
No, it totally makes sense. And I could not agree more. I think I struggled for a while understanding what person-centered care was, because it's like it sounds great, like focus on the person. But I think the thing that helped me understand the difference between person-centered care and maybe anything else that we might discuss is to consider what the opposite would be. So like person-centered care, the opposite could be deficit-centered care or disease-centered care or diagnosis-centered care. And that's not just in dementia care, like that's across all medical communities, right? Like focusing on diabetes rather than the person with diabetes, or cancer versus the person with cancer. And so I think that helped me kind of delineate those definitions, and that might be helpful for someone who is listening. It's not like James said, it's not just like, this person has dementia, we're going to treat them in a certain way. And because we're a dementia care community and because we're memory care, like this is the kind of, here on a silver platter is the kind of care we provide. That doesn't work in practice. And we're going to talk about that a lot today.
Yeah.
How would y'all define the goal of, treating someone with dementia, right? Like if you were to try to just kind of in a nutshell, this is what we're, this is what we're trying to do, because obviously it's an irreversible disease. There is no cure, so we can't cure them of it. What's the goal from your perspective?
Well, I think we say a lot, to caregivers, you're not there to cure, you're there to care. And I'm all about quality of life. I mean, I think that's my goal in dementia care, is giving people the best quality of life throughout their progression. I don't know if that was what you're asking, but that's where I go. Like that is the goal for me when I talk to people. It's how can we give this person and the caregiver the best quality of life together?
Absolutely. I second what Carrie just said. As someone who has experienced diagnosis-centered care, that's been the prominent theme with my experience with my mother. It is when you meet someone who is more people-focused and specific to that person, you finally feel like your person is being validated that they still have a place in this world, instead of they are the Walking Dead type of thing, which there is this underlining mentality of they have this incurable degenerative brain disease. Just make them comfortable.
Right.
Just make sure that you look after yourself as their family member. That's the best you can do. And if you're not a caregiver or a family member who is passionate about their loved one, you could very easily fall into, oh, okay, well, it just is what it is, and we're just going to focus on just coping, and that's it. But as Carrie so passionately expressed, kind of breaking down that doom and gloom really starts with personalizing the experience and recognizing all of the humanity that is in that body, in that life that is still here, and making sure that we're centering our focus, practices, processes toward that.
In my previous career, completely unrelated to what I do now, I was in the pharmaceutical sales industry, and I promoted a product called Aricept, which I'm sure everyone here is familiar with. And I'll never forget sales training 101, and there's kind of some good and some bad with this in regard to kind of how you view that entire process. But one thing that always stuck with me, when they were teaching us how to promote this product, was the tagline, the parachute effect, right? That you're giving these patients, right, that are diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, this ability to kind of slow their progression. that's really the only data that was supportive of really, taking these medications and taking these medications early, albeit all the side effects and some of the things that, make it very difficult to stay compliant with them. But I never really liked that term parachute effect. And I don't think we're trying to slow anyone's life down, right? Like just because, they have dementia doesn't mean that they're not capable of experiencing new things. Doesn't mean that, that we can't take, every day as an opportunity to do something, for the first time. So yeah, it's just interesting, coming from my background, to see this side of it, because I feel very motivated, right? Like now, having exposure with many of you and entertaining, our clients who serve these types of residents, as it's just an opportunity to do something great every day, right?
Yeah, I don't love the parachute metaphor either. I think most of us will feel an ickiness to that too. I'm going to take a stab at your question also, and that's what's so great about this panel. Like we're going to have 6 different answers for every question. But to repeat the question, what's the goal of person-centered care? I think the goal of person-centered care is that the person has a voice in their care, like they are centered in their own outcomes. And so if you had a friend who, let's say they had an accident and they could no longer speak, they could no longer use their voice, your job is not to say, oh, well, Dan, let me speak on your behalf from here until the end of your life. My job as a partner to you would be, Dan can't speak, but he can still speak for himself. And so how do we figure that out? How do we bring that to the forefront? And then I'm going to partner with Dan in accomplishing the goals that he has. So if you think about cognitive handicap, if we were to use that term, if you no longer have the ability to process like rational thought because of how the disease is progressing for you, our job isn't to speak on your behalf. Our job is to figure out, interpret, create those pathways to figure out, what would this person do? What does mom actually want in this situation? And then how do I help her to achieve that? That to me would be the outcome of person-centered care.
As a speech therapist, I really appreciate that answer.
The metaphor. Yeah, I was looking at Adria.
Yes, facilitating someone to communicate their wants and needs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Love that question, Dan. Look at it started this amazing dialogue between all the different perspectives. And Adria, we look at those changes, right? Those decisions at a business level that might seem more simple, but they trickle down and really have an effect on that personalized care, be it positively or negatively. Can you speak to this and share a little bit more about your insights on how those changes really affect us and the care that we provide?
Yeah. I want to also just highlight the fact that even though we're talking about dementia caregiving, we might immediately jump to memory care. But individuals with dementia are living in every community, right? In skilled nursing, in assisted living, in independent living for a time. So this is relevant across care communities. And I want to share an example actually from a personal experience. I do this professionally, working in dementia care, but also my grandmother has dementia and she is living in a skilled nursing facility. And when we started brainstorming this topic, this example was just so glaring. And I think I actually shared this with you, Nicole, at Think Tank several months ago. But basically, overall, the building that she was living in, they're making a financial decision to change cable providers. Very simple, okay, this cable package is cheaper, this provider is cheaper, it makes sense, we're going to make this change. So that was a very high level, a process kind of decision. But what ended up happening in the fallout was my mother, who is the person that comes and visits most often, she came, and my grandmother was she's in the moderate stages of dementia. She was so disoriented. She didn't think she was in her own room. And my mom realized that the TV was off. And so she tried to turn it on to go to the channel, and everything was different. And she very quickly realized that they didn't have TV land anymore. So this new cable package that they got excluded TV Land, but that is the only thing that my grandmother was watching all day long. She loved, Andy Griffith, all those Westerns that's on there. And that was so familiar to her. It was locked into her long-term memory. She knew like she could quote the script of certain episodes of Andy Griffith, although she couldn't, remember some of our names. And so it was very comforting to her, but it was very orienting to her too, is having that on the TV that made her feel like she was at home. And so immediately what ended up happening is she's really confused, disoriented, trying to leave her room. And this is happening times 50, right, across the community. Because people with dementia or not, like this is making a big change, having to remember new numbers, but then also channels being gone completely. It was adding stress to the on-floor staff, right? So like the primary caregivers are no longer, taking people to the bathroom and helping them change clothes, but they're standing there trying to find channels, which is such a waste of time. Mm-hmm. And then they were saying, the building higher ups were saying, well, just you can use streaming services, like you can stream TV Land. Well, the stress that put on the Wi-Fi ended up making it go out. Nobody was able to watch anything. And so it just snowballed into all of these problems that choosing a cable provider doesn't seem like a dementia-centered, like person-centered decision. But I think that's just a very simple explanation of, or an example of what some of these small decisions can look like, and what a difference could have been made if maybe they had talked to the residents. They do resident council, so like talking to them, what channels do you watch? Like, how important is this? And we could have avoided so many things.
Yeah. That's such a great example of that. And I remember that conversation really sticking out of, we wouldn't think that would cause this huge ripple effect. And then it really actually did. Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I was going to say too, it even rippled down into the family because it was involving my mom. They were calling my mom like she's confused, she's upset, medications can start getting involved. It's wild how these decisions make a difference.
Yeah.
I definitely don't want to make light of it, but I can't help but just like laugh to myself a little bit thinking about us being in this position maybe 30, 40 years from now. And like, what, are we not going to be able to get Jersey Shore? Like, are we not going to be able to get Love is Blind? Like what's the beef going to be when they switch our cable provider?
A lot. Yeah, absolutely.
Lots of beef.
Are those your favorite shows? Did we just learn?
I'm sitting here thinking, what are the shows I should say? But yeah, maybe.
The Phillies, I don't know.
Yeah. The Phillies aren't on, we got problems.
That's true. Oh man, James, with caregiving, how can we identify and address these unique needs, right, of each person that is living with dementia? And the side question onto that is addressing that, identifying it, but also the strategies for really balancing business demands with that human touch necessary for that quality care. And what have you seen works well at Bella Groves?
It's like 5 questions, Nicole.
I know.
You're going to have to remind me as we go, but I'll start with the first one.
We start with the first one? Yeah. Okay.
and then I'd love to invite Andrea. I'd love to hear from her because she could probably give depth to this answer as well. For me, when I talk to family caregivers prior to their joining Bella Groves, we really talk about the need for partnership, and that we may be dementia experts in that we have a little bit more information than they do, but it does not stop at we are the sole source of information. We want people to come to the table with their own information. So the best advice I would give to family caregivers is to know specifically more about your loved one's diagnosis. So whether it's frontotemporal or vascular or Alzheimer's or whatever it happens to be, whatever is causing some change to your loved one's cognition and brain, be a deep knower of that thing. And that is what you should bring to the table. And I think a lot of times families wrestle with the feeling of guilt, especially when they're partnered with a senior living provider, and they naturally take on this role as their loved one's advocate. And it inadvertently creates this adversarial relationship between the family and the and the senior living provider that we've reluctantly said, okay, we're going to let you be a part of this. So I think the thing that we have to do from a business perspective before somebody comes into this partnership, we have to agree that it is a partnership, first of all. And we outline, here are your responsibilities. In addition to deep knowing of your person and your loved one, here are also your responsibilities. We're going to give you advice and coaching and guidance on some of the care techniques and approaches. But like a simple example that comes up, families ask, are we allowed to come visit anytime we want? Are we allowed to take my loved one home? And it's not a simple enough answer to say, yes, of course. It's, well, we're going to help you be successful in that. So we're going to give you advice and guidance when it happens. So if taking mom home for the entire weekend becomes really detrimental to her for 3 or 4 or 5 days when she comes back, let's agree up front that we're going to partner on that and come up with a better solution. So it all really still comes back to the family's main responsibility is be a co-expert in your loved one's diagnosis, so that you are not relying on somebody else to tell you, oh, this is normal, Andrea. Yeah, not taking showers is normal, so don't worry about us not giving her showers. So if you understand what's going on, you can advocate a little better for that. I don't know what the other questions are, but I'm gonna give my time back to somebody else.
Sounds good. Anyone else want to share their thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree. It is definitely a partnership. I do think that there has been developed maybe a lack of understanding or just extremes or passion, kind of this imbalance, and this definition like needs to be refined of what being an advocate looks like and what the spirit of advocacy looks like, because I do think that we can be well-intentioned in wanting to advocate and support and make sure that we're our person's biggest cheerleader, but we can also get in the way if we don't check ourselves, if we don't humanize the people that we're trying to create a partnership with, if we realize that you can be assertive without being like disrespectful or super shamey. Like it all kind of perpetuates lots of ick around the whole experience that we can kind of diminish. So it's kind of trying to find a balance between being an advocate that is humanizing and supporting your person, while also humanizing and supporting the process of the person that you're seeking support from. And it's not an easy balance, again, when you're passionate about your person and if you feel like they're being mistreated. I have sometimes crossed the boundary. I was just like, ooh, I was a little bit aggressive with that nurse. Reel it in. It's okay. It's okay. It might be having a bad day. But it's definitely a partnership and a collaboration. And there needs to be expectations set on both sides so that everyone feels like they know what they're doing and making sure that it all works in the best way possible to be a cohesive support system for people that need it.
I find that that completely to be true, Andrea, and like especially when I see my mom caring for her mother who's living in a care community, and for me being on kind of both sides of the fence and knowing the reality of what it looks like to work in these care communities and be on the front lines of some of these processes, but also still like being a human and caring about the person, how difficult that can be for the frontline staff, a lot of times being pulled back and forth. And so a lot of times I have conversations with my mom about, this issue that she's seeing. I can take a minute and say, like, let me just play devil's advocate and let me give you the reality of what that aide is dealing with probably in that moment. And like maybe the lack of support that she's having, and we talk it out. And it's just like, I wish that communication existed between staff and families without like, someone like me having to kind of be in the middle. I think sometimes in care communities, it's a business, yes, but like we got to be human, like we've got to be like, hey, I dropped the ball, you're right. And not necessarily giving excuses, but sometimes giving perspective can really help too.
Right. I agree. I think it's just really important for us I'm really passionate about validating emotions because like being a human is really hard. And I just want to always validate both professional and family caregivers. And like you're saying, in that connection, like it's okay to say, like, Andrea, when you had a hard day, like it's okay to be like, sorry, I was rough, but like handling a lot. And that's so valid. Like it's okay. Like you're not bad to like have those days. And that's why that communication is so important, because yeah, I think, and the professional caregivers too, I never felt like I had support when I was a professional caregiver in my emotions. So then that would kind of come out, and I would have like breakdowns at work all the time, and so it's like there's such a balance for all the caregivers. Yeah, we all need to be on the same page and have communication, but I think there's a fear on both sides, and there's just a lot to go into it. Yeah, but we need to start talking about the emotions and how much, because this industry is heavy. We're dealing with heavy stuff, and we're allowed to have emotions about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, with Adria bringing that conversation up of, you wish those conversations could happen, right? And with James, that kind of segues to that second part of the question of how maybe do we facilitate that, and how do we balance, right? You understand kind of the business demands with being able to have the human touch necessary.
Right. I will preface this by saying that Bella Groves, we're intentionally trying to be outliers here. So I understand that this is not exactly the parameters that most senior living providers are going to be working with. But with that said, let's dream in moonshot language. I fundamentally understand. So everybody on this panel, what we're talking about, this is my jam. I'm having aha moments while we're talking, by the way, and I want to share one here in a moment. But the business plan around Bella Groves is, how do we foster better partnerships? And our end goal is, how do we help caregivers, whether they're professional or family or community in general, how do we help caregivers to upskill and be better at what they naturally want to do? So that's the problem that Bella Groves is trying to solve. Having a care community is almost incidental to that. It's like a secondary thing. But the primary thing is, we want to help upskill any caregiver in the dementia caregiving journey. So I think because of that, we naturally tend to pair a little bit better for fostering these types of conversations and collaborations. We seriously do talk about families up front. This is going to be a partnership, and here's what is expected of you. How many senior living providers are going to say that to a customer that they're trying to court, that here's your responsibility in this equation? And we have declined moving forward with families that we feel like aren't going to live up to that partnership, because that breaks apart the whole thing. So I think, going back to that introduction I gave, we have to figure out what is our mission first, and then figure out the business around it. And I think a lot of senior living providers are doing the opposite. They're trying to build a business and, what's the feature that we're going to provide to differentiate ourselves? And I think that's a really different way to go about it. And I want to quickly give credit to my fellow panelists here. I just had an aha moment that while y'all were talking, that we encourage and advocate for family caregivers to practice self-care. Right? Like we all, and some of your social media channels are all about that, about love the caregiver too. And it just dawned on me that when family caregivers choose a care partner like Bella Groves or whoever, that self-care now extends to other caregivers. So you've invited other caregivers to now be part of that care team. So it's counterintuitive to be like angry at the caregiver, or to be passive aggressive towards the caregiver. And it didn't dawn on me until just now why that is paradoxical, because you're in essence hurting yourself. You're hurting your own care efforts. So if you're going to practice self-care and you choose new care partners to join the journey, well, now that responsibility of self-care extends to everybody on the care team, which includes us.
Good thoughts on that. And I love that we're all learning from each other. And I think we pull out those things that we do find super meaningful and valuable as we look at our work and move forward. And Andrea, I love to hear your perspective on, you're really in that role with your mom, and how family members and professional caregivers, how do we collaborate effectively to ensure that personalized care? How, as families, what role do we play in that approach, and what have you found in working with your mom?
Yeah. So in my experience, really the process of collaboration starts and is led by the family or the loved one of the person with dementia, because no one knows your loved one like you do. And at the end of the day, these professionals are here to meet your needs and the needs of your person. So it's up to you to educate them on what those needs are. So when I recently brought in a professional caregiver as part of my support team and part of my mom's support team, the first thing I looked at was my why, knowing my why. What was the result that I was hoping from partnering with a professional caregiver? For me, I wanted my mom to get more socialization outside of myself and my aunt, who I had moved in with me for additional support. But still keep it kind of in a controlled environment with stuff she knew and things that she was familiar with. And I also wanted to create space for myself so I can just be me outside of work and caregiving. And so with that, my why led everything that I put together for this caregiver, and how I wanted the partnership to look and how I communicated with this person. So I asked questions. I got to know the caregiver. What are they strong in? What do they love about their role? What do they love about being with clients? What are the things they do, but they're not strong in? And then I kind of took some of that information, built it into what my expectations were, and I put those expectations in writing. We got to make sure that our caregivers are caring for many, many people that are very diverse in what they need, how they express their needs, all of that. So put it in writing is just a kind way to communicate to that person. And then be open to change, be open to, there's a lot of perspective that this caregiver brings and potentially experience depending on the professional that you're working with, but there is a lot that they can bring to the table. So I think making sure that you as the family member or the support system of this person is always in a stance of, I am both a teacher and a learner, is a big part of the collaboration process, making sure that we humble ourselves and remember that we don't know it all. And then just make sure that you're hosting those regular check-ins that are intentional with them, because we know how quickly things can change. And there are things that can happen in a day, like little details and little things that maybe your caregiver doesn't communicate because it's just part of their experience. But for you, it would have been super important to know those things because it's a new symptom. My mom's never done that before, all of these things. So making sure that you're hosting regular check-ins, that's kind of my process that I've been using to have a partnership with a caregiver. And once I get a caregiver that's steady, I'm sure this system will go really, really well.
Right.
What type of improvement do you see just from like a 30,000 foot perspective, right? Like when you've built this synergy, how do you see your mom respond in a positive way?
Yeah, she definitely feels heard more because the caregiver has been educated on the language of my mother. She's been educated on how she expresses herself when she's frustrated, when she's overwhelmed. She goes to her room. It's okay. She's safe. Leave her alone. Allow her to decompress. And so she doesn't feel like this pressure to necessarily learn another person because they're so outside the scope of her experience. So now she doesn't feel that. She can just be. She can just sit in herself, in her space, and just be. Because you don't have a caregiver that's poking and prodding and trying to figure things out clumsily, which can be an energy suck for those with dementia. So I've noticed my mom just relax because she doesn't have to try to teach someone who she is. This person already knows to an extent.
Right. Yeah. Well, as I was listening to you, I think we could honestly take that framework for so many parts of our lives. You talk about, what's the why, and that guides you, setting expectations, be adaptable, be a teacher and a learner, and have good communication. I mean, let's just remember that.
That's just the rules for humaning, right?
Right. Yeah. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And with that personalized, approach and having practical processes in place, right, that can guide what we do. Dan, you're going to be on the hot seat for a little bit. It's a longer question, so you can kind of take it in phases. But for you, what are some ways that we can take these processes, such as cleaning or infection control? How do we work them into a personalized approach safely? And how, with service providers like Viking Pure and others that provide caregivers with that support to be able to do their role well, train, personalized, enrich, all of that for safety, which I think is like all of our number one motivators.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking, and I certainly don't want to diverge from some of the amazing things that we're discovering about each other. But I just know how passionate we are about extending our commitment to safety. Not just to the resident, but to the caregivers who are responsible for keeping up this environment. And we understand, many times as a service provider for communities that we kind of fall more into like the backbone, right? Like if the community isn't clean, if the community, has even a perception of not being clean, that's a tremendous impact to the culture. It's an impact to the perception of those, who are kind of on the outside looking in. And then certainly sometimes those that are living within the community, they don't feel safe. They don't feel happy. And there's been some tremendous research, that has been done and this peer reviewed that shows very positive correlations between a clean and a safe environment and either the reduction of prevalence of dementia or to just the overall improvement in kind of caregiving in those spaces. We don't want cluttered rooms, and we don't want to be presenting trip hazards and injury hazards. We don't want clutter for the opportunity for dirt, dust, and kind of grime to develop either and contribute negatively to someone's health. So understanding that an environment needs to be clean is kind of priority number one, and then we try to help do it in the safest possible way, and are fortunate enough to have a technology that can really circumvent the need to use dangerous and toxic chemicals. The products that our machines produce, meet all EPA regulations for being used in these important and immunocompromised environments, but also provide no health risk to the resident, or to the person, who's applying the chemicals. So from our perspective, we want to develop a bunch of enthusiasm for that. We want our team members to be proud that their leaders, at the executive levels or, leadership levels within the community deem their job as important as it is, and want them to be safe doing it, want them to keep coming back to work every day, because they don't just act as environmental service workers or just as dietary workers. One of the most amazing common denominator that I've always been exposed to in the senior living space is everyone's a caregiver first. And then, your job is second. It's amazing to me to see, an environmental service worker take a moment out of her day cleaning a floor or, whatever, to just help someone, a resident get from their room to lunch, because they know it's important, for that resident to be the first in line, at lunch every day. They want to be on their table first. So their job comes kind of second in that moment to make sure that they're servicing their residents. So, but in the same time, we know that they may be leaving their cart behind. They may be leaving some product potentially, into the environment. And it's just kind of nice knowing that if they're utilizing Viking Pure, resident gets their hands on that, somebody else gets their hands on it that maybe shouldn't. It's a safe equation. But I think the commitment from other service providers really just needs to be that determination to weave yourself into the fabric or the culture of said environment, and to understand how those actions that go above and beyond what you actually are committed to providing from a service perspective meet the overall residents' needs. I think that's got to be priority number one.
Yeah, completely. Well, and you and I have had conversation how safety for families is like a top I don't know the date, like top 3 concern of they want that environment to be safe and just the brain health piece. And a service provider can, I believe, support or even derail your personalized approaches, right? So just how important that is to have those people in place that.
Yeah, definitely. We understand that our customers are committed ultimately, to their residents, and we have to share in that level of responsiveness, and it's extremely important to me that as a customer, you look at Viking Pure, or whoever else you're using throughout your environment, as somebody who's in alignment with you is equally committed to that level of responsiveness and ensuring that that you're building your community stays afloat and safely operational. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. So Adria, the example with your grandma was, I think we could really see how that plays out and can really affect us. What are some other really good examples of quote unquote good policies that can have unintended negative effects, or even vice versa, I suppose?
Yeah. So actually, while Dan was talking, it made me think of one, which is I'm a big proponent for Montessori-based activities, which is where we involve individuals with dementia into really purpose-filled tasks and things that are familiar to them that they've done 1,000 times in their life. And so cleaning is one of them. And I have gotten pushback from communities in the past where, I've talked to a lot of speech therapists where some of these examples will come from, but sometimes they'll say like, oh, my community says that like residents can't work, like that's undignified for them to work. And so them folding towels or like wiping down the table after lunch is looked at as undignified because on paper we can't have residents work. That looks bad. But what if that fulfills them? Like, what if that gives them purpose and a sense of belonging? So I think that's one that when Dan was talking, that reminded me of is some communities might not like the idea of cleaning supplies being available or even around residents at all for that reason. Hug a therapist in your life, because speech, occupational, and physical therapists, especially that work in skilled nursing facilities, are under a policy of productivity. And so when I was working in these communities, I would have it's very common to have a 90% productivity standard. And so what that means is that in an 8-hour day, I would only have 48 minutes to do things that were unproductive, according to Medicare. So all of the things that can't be billable by insurance, by Medicare specifically, I had to fit in 48 minutes of my entire day. So that's going to the bathroom. That's walking from resident room to a resident room. That's communicating with staff when the patient isn't present. So that's insane. Like, so when you said like service providers, like going above and beyond, like how that's like so desirable. No, I get penalized. Like we would be reprimanded and disciplined if we did anything that was not billable by insurance and it took more than 48 minutes in an entire day. Those policies suck. I've heard from many speech therapists over the last year in a lot of my trainings about making signs for people with dementia to make them more independent. So making a sign that says like, I will always lock my brakes on my wheelchair before I stand up to decrease risk of falls. Even though that intervention is effective, sometimes state surveyors come in and they will make them remove signs because they're HIPAA violations or it's a dignity issue. And I like to say, I have signs in my house everywhere to remind me of things. And I don't have dementia. Like that's, I've also been in many communities where if a resident has an injury with a certain piece of equipment, so a bed rail, a transfer pole, a rollator, certain features on a wheelchair, if there's been an injury of any kind in any community that's owned by the same company, even if it's 20 states away and it was one time, they remove it from everyone. And I know that's liability concerns, but that has deeply impacted people's independence. And I have seen residents in memory care have to be moved into nursing homes, because now without that piece of equipment that helps them move, they can no longer fit the criteria of the place that they lived.
Yeah.
Which is really disappointing. And I think the last one I'll give, which is an insane policy that I experienced one time, which on paper sounds great. In a community I worked in, they said if a resident in your presence says that hurts or you hurt me, you have to immediately suspend yourself, like walk away, report yourself, write an incident report, and you are suspended pending an investigation, which makes that sounds great. But you know how many physical and occupational therapists were suspended because they were rehabbing someone who has a brand new knee, or they're just post-op after a hip replacement, and doing normal exercise made them say, "Ooh, that hurts." And it was no exceptions. If someone else heard a resident say that and you were present and you were like participating with them, you could be fired, you could lose your license. It was madness for a while when we had to have conversations about, can we talk about this in a more common sense way? Because it was really bad for a while. So those are just a few examples off the top of my head when I made a list the other day of some policies I've seen, and it only goes from there. And it's a lot of these policies sound good on paper and it protects communities, but it has detrimental effects for the individuals.
Right. It
Let
does.
me defend senior living here. I'm just kidding. There's Adrian was like, okay, go for it, James. But no, I mean, it's incredible. I would listen to an hour-long thing of each of our panelists here on just things they want to talk about. But this is getting at the heart of person versus process, and how do we, as an industry and in affiliated industries, how do we get better at this stuff? Because everything that Adrian just exemplified, I'm like, yep, I've seen that before, I've done that before. And as she was talking, I put it in the chat comment, but I can't tell you how many time studies I've been a part of in different senior living organizations. And the only purpose of that time study was to determine what is your staffing ratio going to be. So in essence, how long does a shower take? Oh, well, somebody with dementia is going to take this long. Somebody without dementia is going to take this long. And it's some quantitative calculator to depersonalize someone's needs. And so you're putting process way, way, way ahead of that person. And so for us, we took a best guess at it. So having 2 16-room communities and staffing them at a 1 caregiver to 4 resident ratio, 1 to 4 ratio, that's a best guess as to having enough time to allow for variability throughout the day. So here's a crazy idea. We do not have an activities calendar. So when people come in and ask, hey, can you give me your activities calendar? Because it is mandated by state. So technically we have one that we put on paper so we can give it to state if they come visit. Damn it, I just said that out loud. But for families, I think about, it strikes them when they're like, what do you mean you don't have an activity calendar? I said, well, show me your activity calendar. Like, what do you use for your own life's activities? And they're like, well, I don't have one, but my mom should have one. And it goes into this dialogue about, look, we're not shooting from the hip here. We're well researched. We have a very specific philosophy about person-centered programming, activities, purposefulness, and I'm happy to tell you about all of that. But there is no way I can predict what Andrea's mom is going to want to do next Thursday. And I'm sure as heck not going to put it on a calendar. So we have ideas and principles and frameworks for how to do programming, but we're not going to commit it to an activity calendar to say next Thursday, she's really going to want to go for ice cream.
Yeah. So true. I mean, that's personalization right there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it has to, our processes have to allow for this flexibility in real time, like trying to determine what do I do with the given information that I have now. And that is what our professional caregivers, those 1 caregiver to every 4 residents, they have to figure out in real time, what do I do right now that's purposeful? What do I do right now given the set of circumstances with everybody here? And that really is the work. We have to have processes around training and helping them to think and helping them to adapt, helping them to take all of that variability and do something productive with it. But we can't mandate, do this at 8 o'clock, do this at 8:30, do this at 8:40.
Right. Yeah, we can't. We can't at all. And with Adria's perspective, with your mom, when you've seen these approaches that are personalized implementing, how have you found that to be successful from when they're not? And how does that create, I mean, obviously we know it creates it so much more meaning in that environment, but to see it really play out in real time for you.
I'm sorry, did you say Andrea or Adria?
I said Adria, but I very well could have said Andrea because I was practicing earlier with Carrie. I'm like, I got to get it right. Andrea.
Okay, can you repeat the question? Because I thought
Yeah,
it was.
I lost the question too because Dan is distracting everybody with ice cream jokes. So to be fair, Nicole, repeat the question.
This is for Andrea. Andrea.
Okay. Everybody mute but Andrea.
For success, yes, when we implement those personalized care approaches in dementia caregiving.
Yeah. So I feel like when it comes to what success looks like, I feel like there's three metrics that I look at least. I'm looking at what success looks like for me, what success looks like or may feel like for my mother and for the paid caregiver. Again, making sure in order to make sure that we're really a cohesive system. So I feel like for success for a family member of the person or a support to the person with Alzheimer's would be having a safe place with that professional to be able to express the things that I love, the things that I want, the things that I don't like. And knowing that we can be able to work through those things, that the person isn't going to become super hyper sensitive. And then maybe now I'm worried that they're going to take it out on my loved one. Like having a safe space for communication and transparency is super important, and is a key to a metric for success with all three of the elements there. Consistency, I think, is super important as well. If there's like a consistent, you have a plan, you're communicating, you've got a plan, and you're consistently it's like a well-oiled machine. You guys know what to expect, you've communicated, and now you're just going to run with the plan at that point. I feel like is a piece of success for all three as well. Consistency obviously is a big theme when it comes to someone who has dementia, knowing that they feel like they have systems and people that they can rely on, even if they don't realize that it's a part of like a whole system, but just knowing that they have something they can count on in their constantly changing world that they're already experiencing.
Right.
And then I feel like success also looks like just making sure that expectations are being met. I think that sometimes as a caregiver, because you've got 5 million things going on, I know I've been tempted to sometimes just settle for having someone here.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take it because I can't deal with anything else. Someone's here, a body is here, but that's fine. But really, it's not doing anyone any justice if I basically just allow a body to fill a need without creating any system of accountability. And so I feel like success looks like having a system where there's also that accountability and that your professional is open to those accountability systems in working with you. I've noticed that with the one caregiver so far that I've had success with, this has kind of been what the experience has been for us. And I'm like, yes, this gives me hope. This is what it's supposed to look like and feel like.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I know we said we had a lot to cover and we're a little over time. Narelle, how are we doing? We have time for one more.
She's like,
question.
land the plane, guys.
Yeah, let's keep going. I think we'll reserve any questions from the audience. You guys can feel free to put those in the chat, and I will email them to the appropriate panelists, and we'll get back to you for sure. But yeah, let's
All right,
finish
we'll finish strong. Here we go. With looking at what's happening right in the future, Carrie, what are some emerging trends and innovation that you're seeing in dementia care that you believe will enhance how we offer that personalized care in the future?
So great question. I am very passionate about age tech, and some of us on here are part of the AARP Age Tech Collaborative, and it's such a beautiful thing to see what's coming out. But I went to sit down when I thought of this question, when I got this, and I was like, oh, I'm going to make a list of things. And then I said, no, you're not, because that's what we're talking about is person-centered care. So not any, I can tell you all these companies, but that's kind of blanketed, right? It's not like, there's a lot of options, but I don't want to just throw out a couple companies because, again, that's kind of blanketing what we need. So what I want to say is I'm excited about the education that's coming out, the awareness, the companies that are waking up to building things that can support us as we age and as we live with dementia and caregivers. And so I think there's a plethora of things, and it excites me. And just thinking specifically to meaningful engagement, person-centered engagement. There's a lot of beautiful companies coming out and a lot of innovations that are specific to dementia care, which is very exciting. And you can take those tools and then personalize it yourself and use them in specific ways for the people you're caring for. But I think really right now, what the emerging trend is just awareness. The emerging trend right now is, oh, we need to build for dementia. We need to build for caregivers. We need to build these personalized approaches and innovations. So I will say that, I've talked to someone before who works in dementia-specific engagement, and she said to me, isn't it interesting how children have a plethora of engagement items to choose from? You can have, very personalized things. Kids have a whole toy store, right? And then people living with dementia might have 2 choices of an engagement item, and finally we're getting more choices and more person-centered approaches because you finally have choice. So I know I'm annoying that I'm not throwing out specific things, but I want to say it's on us to find the personalized things that are coming out for the people we're caring for. So I invite you to look at what is coming out in the age tech world specifically and finding the different things there. And I also think, really focusing on the caregiver and how to make the caregiver's life as supporting them in their life as much as possible. Innovations are coming out, apps and things like that to keep communication well between communities, professionals, and the caregivers. So I just think there's a lot of emerging trends in just seeing the awareness and seeing what we need to focus on now going forward, if that makes sense. But I didn't want to blanket statement, certain innovations, because again, it's all different. So for us all, we all need different things. So yeah, but there's awesome innovations. I'm excited and feeling very hopeful for the future.
I am too. And as James said in the chat, touche, Carrie, right? If we're talking about personalized care, to say specifically, here's what you need. So I love that. That's so true. There's so much momentum that's happening right now. More awareness, conversations like this to build that awareness and education is so important. So we're so thankful everyone came today. Narelle, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts, but thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you. That was really all I had to say. Thank you to each of our panelists, Andrea, Carrie, Nicole, James, and Adria, and of course, Dan as well. You guys have been amazing, and I think this conversation was super, super valuable. And I can't remember who said it, but it's important to keep this awareness going. And I'm glad that we've kind of participated today, but I really hope that, I know you all will continue this going, but I hope that our attendees will as well. And again, attendees, feel free to pop questions in, or I will be sending out an email later today with the replay from today's panel. Feel free to share that around. Feel free to respond to that with questions that you have, and we'll make sure that we get them answered. But again, thank you to everyone. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
For being here.
Bye-bye.